The space station Epsilon 7 floated quietly in the darkness between stars. It was built for meetings like this one. The station had no weapons and belonged to no single species. Today it would host the most important meeting in human history. Captain. Yoon checked his uniform one more time as his ship approached the docking bay. The diplomatic vessel New Seoul was small compared to the massive alien ships already docked at the station. Through the viewport he could see vessels that looked like floating crystals, others that seemed to be made of living metal, and one that appeared to be mostly water held together by energy fields. "Captain, we are cleared for docking," reported Lieutenant Kim from the pilot seat. She was young but steady, chosen for this mission because she could stay calm under pressure. "Thank you, Lieutenant." "Dr. Park, are you ready for this?" Captain Yoon turned to the older man who was studying data tablets with intense focus. Dr. Park looked up from his research. "As ready as anyone can be for meeting beings from another world. The council representatives have been studying us for 3 cycles. They think they know everything about humans." The docking was smooth. As they walked through the station corridors, Captain Yoon noticed how everything was built much larger than needed for humans. The ceilings were high enough for beings twice their height. The doors were wide enough for creatures much broader than any human. They entered the main meeting chamber and stopped. The alien representatives were already waiting, and they were nothing like the humans had imagined. The Vorthari delegate stood nearly 3 meters tall. Its body was made of what looked like living crystal that shifted colors as it moved. Light seemed to flow through its transparent form in patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, the words came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Welcome, small ones," the Vorthari said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with distant thunder. "We are pleased to finally meet the mammals of Sol 3. Next to the crystal being sat something that looked like a collection of insects that had learned to work together. The Thex representative was actually dozens of smaller creatures that moved as one mind. They whispered among themselves in clicks and buzzes before speaking in unison. "Curious," they said together. "So small and soft. No natural armor. No poison. No claws or fangs. How do you survive on your world?" The third delegate floated in a tank of liquid that glowed with soft blue light. The Nerion looked like a jellyfish the size of a small car, with tentacles that moved in patterns too complex to follow. When it communicated, the words appeared directly in their minds without sound. "Welcome to the greater galaxy, young species. We hope this meeting will be beneficial for all." Captain Yoon stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Humanity is honored to make contact with the Galactic Council." The 3 aliens exchanged what could only be described as looks, though none of them had faces that humans could easily read. There was something in their manner that made Dr. Park uncomfortable. They seemed almost amused. The Vorthari delegate gestured with an arm that looked like flowing glass. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss about your species' future." The humans took their seats around the large table. Captain Yoon noticed that their chairs were clearly added later, much smaller than the others and out of place in the grand chamber. "First," the Nerion's voice echoed in their minds, "we must address the obvious concerns. Your species is remarkably fragile. You require very specific atmospheric conditions to survive. Your bodies are weak and easily damaged. You have no natural weapons or defenses." Dr. Park leaned forward. "While humans may not have natural armor or claws, we have developed technology and social cooperation that has allowed us to thrive on our world." The Thex collective buzzed with what might have been laughter. "Yes, we have observed your tool use. Very clever for such a primitive species, like watching insects learn to use leaves as umbrellas." Captain Yoon felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice level. "We prefer to think of ourselves as adaptable rather than primitive." "Of course you do," the Vorthari said, its crystal form shifting to deeper blue tones. "All young species believe they are special, but we have seen thousands of civilizations rise and fall. We know the patterns." The Nerion floated closer to the humans in its tank. "Your brain scans show interesting activity, but no psychic abilities. You cannot communicate mind to mind like civilized species. You are bound to your physical forms with no ability to exist as pure energy or thought. You require constant feeding, added the Thex Collective. Your bodies shut down for hours each day in what you call sleep. You are dependent on a very narrow temperature range. Most concerning of all, you seem to feel pain quite intensely. Dr. Park shifted in his seat. These characteristics have driven us to develop remarkable problem-solving abilities and cooperative behaviors. We work together to overcome individual limitations. The three aliens exchanged their wordless communications again. Finally, the Vorthari spoke for all of them. This is why we have called this meeting. The Galactic Council has decided to offer your species protected status. You will be allowed to remain on your homeworld under our guidance. We will provide technology to help you survive and defend you from the many dangers of the galaxy. Captain Yoon sat back in his chair. Protected status? Think of it as a nature preserve, the Nerion explained, its mental voice carrying what seemed like kindness. Your species is too fragile for the realities of galactic civilization. Space travel, alien environments, contact with aggressive species, these things would destroy you. We have seen it happen before. What about our own space exploration? Lieutenant Kim asked. We have already begun expanding into our solar system. The Thex Collective buzzed dismissively. Child's play in your own backyard. The real galaxy is nothing like your peaceful neighborhood. There are species that could destroy your entire world without thinking about it. Pirates, slavers, world eaters. Beings that would see humans as nothing more than exotic pets or snacks. We are offering you safety, the Vorthari added. A chance for your species to develop in peace, without the dangers that have destroyed so many others. Dr. Park looked at his companions. And if we refuse this protection? The chamber fell silent for a long moment. The aliens looked at each other in ways that suggested entire conversations happening beyond human perception. That would be unfortunate. The Nerion finally replied. Unprotected species rarely survive their first century after contact. If you insist on venturing into the greater galaxy, you would need to be relocated to prevent you from accidentally starting wars or disrupting established territories. Relocated where? Captain Yoon asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. There are several uninhabited systems in the outer rim, the Vorthari said casually. Far from civilized space where you could not cause problems for yourselves or others. The meeting continued for several more hours, but the essential message was clear. Humanity had two choices: accept protection and remain confined to Earth, or be moved to the galactic equivalent of exile, where they would likely die out within generations. As they walked back to their ship, Lieutenant Kim shook her head in frustration. Did you hear how they talked about us like we were children playing with dangerous toys? Dr. Park was quiet, thinking about everything he had observed. There was something else, he said finally. Did you notice how they kept referring to patterns in previous civilizations? They spoke as if they had seen this exact situation many times before. Captain Yoon nodded grimly. The question is, what happened to all those other species they protected? As the new soul undocked from Epsilon 7 and began its journey back to Earth, none of the humans noticed the small monitoring devices that had been attached to their ship during the meeting. The Galactic Council wanted to keep a close eye on their newest subjects. In the meeting chamber, the three alien representatives discussed the encounter. They took it better than expected, the Nerion observed. All species do at first, the Vorthari replied. They think their cooperation and tools make them special. They all learn otherwise. The Thex Collective buzzed agreement. Another primitive species properly contained. The galaxy remains orderly and peaceful. None of them had noticed Dr. Park's small recording device or Lieutenant Kim's careful observations of the station's layout, or Captain Yoon's mental notes about council procedures and weaknesses. The aliens had made their first mistake. They had underestimated humanity's ability to learn from every encounter, even seemingly hopeless ones. 6 months after the meeting at Epsilon 7, everything changed. A message arrived at Earth from the Galactic Council that surprised everyone. They wanted to conduct what they called capability assessments on newly discovered species. It would happen on a planet called Kepler 442b. Captain Yoon read the message again in his office aboard the New Sol. The Council claimed this was a standard procedure for all species seeking membership in galactic civilization. Each species would send representatives to demonstrate their survival skills and adaptive abilities. "It sounds like a test," said Dr. Park, who was reviewing the planet's data. "Kepler 442b is classified as a hostile environment. Extreme weather, dangerous wildlife, limited resources." Lieutenant Kim looked up from her tactical analysis. "Why would they suddenly want to test us? 6 months ago they wanted to protect us from the dangerous galaxy." Captain Yoon had been thinking the same thing. Maybe they want to prove their point. Show the galaxy that humans really are too weak to survive without their protection. The Council had been specific about who could participate. Only 3 humans would be allowed, and they had to represent different skills. After long discussions, Earth's leaders chose Engineer Lee for his technical expertise, Sergeant Choi for his military experience, and Medic Han for her medical knowledge. Engineer Lee was a quiet man who could fix anything or build what was needed, from whatever materials were available. He had served on deep space construction projects and knew how to survive in harsh environments. Sergeant Choi was a veteran of Earth's military conflicts, trained in combat and survival techniques. Medic Han had worked in disaster zones across Earth, saving lives under impossible conditions. The transport ship that carried them to Kepler 442b was a Council vessel. The human team found themselves sharing space with representatives from 12 other species. Most of the aliens ignored the humans completely, treating them like cargo rather than fellow participants. The Keth representative was a reptilian creature covered in natural armor plates. Sharp claws extended from each finger, and poison sacs were visible under its jaw. It looked at the humans with what might have been pity. "Soft skins," the Keth hissed. "This will not end well for you." A member of the molten hegemony sat near the back of the transport. Its body appeared to be made of living rock and metal. When it moved, small pieces of stone fell to the floor. The creature radiated heat that made the air shimmer around it. "Fragile organics," it rumbled in a voice like grinding stones. "Why do the Council waste time with creatures that break so easily?" The energy being from the Flux Collective flickered, in and out of visible light. When it spoke, the words seemed to come from the air itself. "Flesh is a prison. Those bound to physical form cannot truly adapt." Engineer Lee listened to all of this without responding. He was busy studying the equipment they had been given. Each team received basic survival gear appropriate for their species. The human equipment included standard camping supplies, basic tools, and emergency rations. Sergeant Choi examined the terrain maps they had been provided. The drop zones are spread across different climate areas: forest, desert, mountains, swampland. Looks like they want to test how each species handles different environments. Medic Han was reviewing the medical supplies in their kit. "Basic first aid materials, nothing fancy. If someone gets seriously hurt, we will have to be creative." The transport reached Kepler 442b after a 3-day journey. Looking down at the planet from orbit, the humans could see why it was chosen as a testing ground. Storm systems covered half the surface. The land masses showed extreme geographical features: towering mountains, vast deserts, dense forests, and swampy regions that seemed to stretch for thousands of kilometers. "Participants will be dropped at designated coordinates," announced the transport's automated system. "Each team will have 7 standard days to demonstrate survival and adaptation capabilities. Council observers will monitor all activities from orbital platforms." The first team to be deployed was the Keith representative. It was dropped into a dense forest region. Through the transport's viewing screens, the humans watched as the creature immediately blended with its surroundings, using natural camouflage. Within minutes, it had killed and eaten a local animal using its claws and poison. "Impressive," commented one of the Council observers over the communication system. "Natural predator instincts and perfect environmental adaptation." The molten hegemony representative was deployed into a volcanic region. The heat and toxic gases that would kill most life forms seemed to make it stronger. It began reshaping the landscape around itself, using its mineral body to create shelter from the raw materials of the planet. Excellent durability and environmental manipulation, noted another observer. The Flux Collective member was placed in an area with severe electromagnetic storms. Instead of being hindered by the energy discharges, it absorbed them and grew brighter. The being began to phase in and out of solid matter, exploring underground caves and mountain peaks with equal ease. Superior energy manipulation and phase capabilities, recorded a third observer. Team after team demonstrated their natural advantages. Species with thick hides weathered environmental hazards. Those with multiple limbs built complex shelters. Quickly, creatures with enhanced senses found food and water sources that would be invisible to others. Finally, it was the human team's turn. Engineer Lee, Sergeant Choi, and Medic Han were dropped into a mixed terrain area that included forest, hills, and a river system. The temperature was cold enough to be dangerous but not immediately deadly. Local wildlife included predators that the orbital scan suggested were larger and more aggressive than Earth animals. The Council observers watched with scientific interest as the humans landed. Unlike other species that immediately used their natural abilities, the humans spent several minutes just looking around and talking to each other. Curious behavior, commented Thex Prime from the main observation ship. They appear to be having a discussion instead of taking survival actions, probably trying to overcome their natural fear responses, suggested the Vorthari observer. Prey species often freeze when faced with dangerous situations. What the aliens could not hear was the actual conversation happening on the ground. Water. Source to the east, about 2 kilometers, Sergeant Choi reported after checking his compass and the terrain. High ground to the south offers good visibility and defensive positions. Engineer Lee was examining the local vegetation and soil samples. Good news. The plant life here has similar chemical structures to Earth flora. Some of these might be edible with proper preparation. Medic Han was setting up basic medical stations as they moved. The air is clean but thin. We will need to be careful about overexertion until we acclimatize. From orbit, this looked like confused wandering. The humans moved slowly compared to other species. They stopped frequently to examine things that seemed unimportant. They carried all their equipment instead of discarding unnecessary items like more efficient species had done. They are struggling already, observed the Nerion representative. Look how much effort they require just for basic movement. But Dr. Park, monitoring the situation from the orbital station as an official observer, was seeing something different. The humans were not struggling. They were gathering information. Every stop, every examination, every discussion was building a complete picture of their environment. While other species relied on instinct and natural abilities, the humans were learning. Engineer Lee was identifying useful materials and potential tools. Sergeant Choi was mapping terrain features and escape routes. Medic Han was cataloging potential medical resources from local plants and minerals. By the end of their first day, while other species had established basic survival positions, the human team had built something unprecedented. They had created a comprehensive understanding of their environment that went far beyond simple survival. They did not just find shelter. They built it from local materials using techniques that maximized efficiency and comfort. They did not just locate food sources. They established a sustainable system for gathering and preparing nutrition that would last for weeks. Most importantly, they did something that no other species had attempted. They began to improve their situation instead of just enduring it. As the sun set on Kepler 442b, the Council observers made their notes. Most species were performing exactly as predicted based on their natural capabilities. But the humans were doing something that did not fit any of their models. They were changing the rules of the test simply by refusing to accept that survival was the only goal. Interesting, Dr. Park murmured as he reviewed the day's observations. The aliens thought they were watching humans struggle to survive. They had no idea they were witnessing the first stages of humanity doing what it did best, turning an impossible situation into an opportunity. On the third day of testing, Kepler 442b began to show its true nature. The planet's automated systems, left behind by some ancient civilization, started introducing new challenges to test the species even further. The weather patterns became extreme. Massive storms rolled across the landscape with winds strong enough to uproot trees. Temperature swings went from freezing cold to dangerous heat within hours. Rain fell in torrents that could flood entire valleys, followed by drought, conditions that cracked the ground. The council observers watched with great interest as each species dealt with these new pressures. This was the real test. How would they adapt when their environment became actively hostile? The Keth representative found shelter in a cave system and waited out the worst storms. Its natural armor protected it from temperature changes, and its ability to slow its metabolism meant it could survive on very little food during the harsh weather. Excellent survival instincts, noted Thex Prime. The Keth shows proper species behavior under stress. The molten hegemony member simply endured everything the planet threw at it. Extreme heat made it stronger. Cold only slowed it down slightly. The creature continued reshaping its environment, now building more complex structures from the volcanic rock around it. Perfect example of using natural advantages, commented the Vorthari observer. The Flux Collective representative began to destabilize as the electromagnetic storms grew stronger. Its energy form flickered more frequently, and it seemed to have difficulty maintaining solid shape. The being retreated to underground areas where the magnetic interference was weaker. Some adaptation challenges noted, recorded the Nerion observer, but still performing within acceptable parameters for an energy-based life form. Then the observers turned their attention to the human team, expecting to see them struggling even more as conditions worsened. What they saw instead confused them completely. When the first major storm hit the human camp, it destroyed their carefully built shelter in minutes. Any reasonable species would have been demoralized by losing days of work to forces beyond their control. Instead, Engineer Lee stood in the rain, examining the wreckage with obvious fascination. "Look at this," he called to his teammates, pointing at how the wind had twisted their support beams. "The failure points tell us exactly what forces we are dealing with. We can build much better now." Sergeant Choi was already gathering salvageable materials. The storm came from the northwest and hit us at a 45-degree angle. If we build the next shelter at this location instead, the hills will redirect the wind flow around us. Medic Han had moved their medical supplies to higher ground before the storm even arrived. "I noticed the air pressure changes 20 minutes before the weather hit. We can predict these storms if we pay attention to the signs." The council observers exchanged confused communications. This was not how species were supposed to react to environmental setbacks. They were supposed to adapt their behavior to cope with the problems, not solve the problems themselves. But the humans were just getting started. Their new shelter was not just rebuilt, it was engineered. Engineer Lee had studied how the local trees bent without breaking in high winds, then incorporated those principles into their structure. The result was a building that moved with the storm instead of fighting it. When their food supplies were damaged by flooding, they did not just ration what remained. Medic Han had been experimenting with local plants for days, and now she began cultivating them. She created a growing system that used the excess water from the storms to produce more nutrition than their original supplies had contained. "This is highly irregular behavior," Thex Prime observed. "They are changing their environment instead of adapting to it." "Is that not what the molten hegemony representative is doing?" asked Dr. Park from his position on the observation deck. "That is completely different," the Vorthari replied. "Rock shaping is a natural ability. These humans are using artificial methods to alter their situation." "What makes something natural versus artificial?" Dr. Park asked innocently. The aliens did not answer, but their uncomfortable silence suggested they had never considered the question. As the days continued, something unprecedented began happening. The human team was not just surviving the increasingly difficult conditions, they were getting better at handling them. Each storm taught them something new about weather patterns. Every food shortage led to innovations in gathering and preparation. When dangerous animals approached their camp, they did not just fight them off or hide from them. They studied the creature's behavior and found ways to coexist. On the 5th day, disaster struck the testing ground. A young Keth scout named Vesh became trapped in a rockslide during one of the severe storms. The creature was badly injured and calling for help, but its own team had no way to reach it without risking more lives. The council observers noted the situation with scientific interest. Unfortunate, but natural selection is an important part of species development. The weak individual will be eliminated, strengthening the gene pool. They expected the other species to ignore the trapped Keth. Interfering with another species' test could result in disqualification, and there was no benefit to risking their own safety for a creature that had shown them nothing but contempt. The human team heard the distress calls and immediately stopped what they were doing. "Someone is in trouble," Sergeant Choi said, checking his equipment. "It is not our species," Engineer Lee pointed out. "Helping might violate the test rules." Medic Han was already packing medical supplies. "Since when do humans only help other humans? Someone needs help. We help. That is what we do." The council observers watched in amazement as the human team abandoned their own safety and comfort to rescue a creature that belonged to a species that had insulted them repeatedly. The rescue took 6 hours. Engineer Lee rigged a pulley system to move the heavy rock safely. Sergeant Choi rappelled down dangerous cliff faces to reach the injured Keth. Medic Han treated wounds on a completely alien physiology using techniques she invented on the spot. When they finally pulled Vesh to safety, the young Keth was unconscious and badly hurt. The human team spent the next 2 days nursing the alien back to health, sharing their food and shelter without any expectation of reward. The council observers fell silent. In thousands of years of testing species, they had never seen anything like this. "Why?" Vesh asked when he finally regained consciousness. "Your species and mine are not allies. I have said cruel things about humans. Why did you risk everything to save me?" Medic Han, who was checking his bandages, smiled. "Because you needed help, and we could provide it. That is reason enough." From the orbital observation stations, Dr. Park watched the alien observers struggle to process what they had witnessed. Their entire understanding of how species behaved was being challenged by humans who refused to follow the rules of survival that governed every other form of life in the galaxy. But the real test was just beginning. The planet's ancient defense systems had been activated by all the activity on the surface. Deep underground, war machines that had slept for millennia were beginning to wake up. The Council had thought they were testing species' survival capabilities. They had no idea they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of strength forever. On the 6th day, everything changed. Deep beneath Kepler 442b, ancient machines detected the presence of multiple life forms on the surface. Systems that had been dormant for thousands of years began to activate with mechanical precision. The first sign of trouble came when the ground started vibrating. At first, the various species thought it was another environmental challenge, perhaps earthquakes or volcanic activity. The Council observers noted the seismic readings with scientific interest. Then, the war machines emerged. They rose from hidden underground facilities like metal nightmares from a forgotten age. Each machine stood 3 meters tall, built from materials that gleamed despite their obvious age. Their design was purely functional. No decoration, no unnecessary features, just efficient killing mechanisms powered by energy sources the Council had never seen before. The machines began hunting immediately. Their sensors could detect any form of life, and their programming was simple: eliminate all organic presence on the planet. The first species to encounter them was a team of crystalline builders working in the mountain region. These beings could shape stone with their minds and had created impressive fortifications during the test. None of it mattered. The war machines cut through solid rock like paper and disintegrated the builders with weapons that turned matter into energy. Panic spread across the observation stations as more machines appeared across the planet. The Council members watched in horror as their carefully controlled test turned into a massacre. "Immediate extraction protocols," ordered Thex Prime. "All test subjects must be evacuated now." But the machines had anticipated this. As soon as the Council ships tried to enter the atmosphere, defensive systems activated around the planet. Energy barriers prevented any ship from getting close enough for rescue operations. The Keth representative Vash was caught in the open when 3 machines surrounded him. His natural armor and claws, so effective against organic threats, were useless against metal and energy weapons. He sent out a desperate distress call before the machines closed in. "This is Vash. I am trapped in Sector 7. The Metal Hunters have found me. Tell my clan I fought with honor." The Council observers could only watch helplessly as their extraction ships were pushed back by the planetary defenses. Species after species sent similar final messages as the machines systematically hunted them down. The molten hegemony representative lasted longer than most. Its rock-based body could absorb several hits from the energy weapons, but eventually even living stone crumbled under sustained fire. The energy beings of the Flux Collective tried to phase out of existence, but the machines somehow tracked their energy signatures and disrupted their forms with electromagnetic pulses. One by one, the alien teams fell silent, except for the humans. Engineer Lee had been studying the seismic readings for hours before the machines appeared. When the first war machine emerged near their camp, he was not surprised. "Ancient automated defense system," he told his teammates calmly. "Probably left behind by whoever terraformed this planet originally. Motion sensors, heat detection, life, sign analysis. They are hunting anything that registers as biological." Sergeant Choi was already moving their supplies to a more defensible position. "How do we fight them?" "We do not fight them," Engineer Lee replied. "We outsmart them." The first machine that found their camp moved with mechanical efficiency. It scanned the area where the humans had been living, detected traces of organic presence, and began a systematic search pattern. It never found them. The humans had not run away. Instead, they had gone underground using natural cave systems that Engineer Lee had mapped during their first days on the planet. But more than that, they had learned to mask their biological signatures using techniques that Medic Han had developed from studying local plant chemistry. From their hidden position, they watched the machines search their empty camp. Sergeant Choi was taking detailed notes on its movement patterns, sensor capabilities, and weapon systems. "It follows predictable search algorithms," he whispered. "Military programming, probably designed to hunt soldiers who behave in standard, tactical ways." That was when they heard Vash calling for help. The young Keth was pinned down in a rocky area several kilometers away. 3 machines had him surrounded, and his situation was hopeless. The Council extraction ships could not reach him, and his own natural abilities were useless against artificial opponents. "We cannot reach him in time," Engineer Lee said, after checking the distance and terrain. "Maybe we cannot reach him," Sergeant Choi replied, "but we can reach them." What happened next would be discussed in council chambers for generations to come. Sergeant Choi did not charge directly at the machines like a traditional warrior would. Instead, he used every lesson the human team had learned about the planet's environment during their testing period. He triggered a rock slide that buried one machine completely. He redirected a stream to flood the area where the second machine was standing, shorting out its electrical systems. For the third machine, he used knowledge that Medic Han had gathered about local plant toxins to create a chemical reaction that corroded the machine's armor. But the most remarkable thing was not his tactics. It was his willingness to risk everything for a being who had insulted his species and shown nothing but contempt for humans. When the machines were destroyed, Vash was badly injured but alive. Sergeant Choi, who had sustained serious wounds during the fighting, dragged the unconscious Keth to safety before collapsing. The council observers watched in stunned silence. They had expected the humans to hide or die like all the other species. They had never imagined that these supposedly weak creatures would deliberately attack the machines to save someone else. "This is impossible," the Vorthari observer stated. "No species risks itself for members of other species. It violates all principles of evolutionary behavior." Dr. Park, monitoring from the main observation ship, smiled grimly. "You have been studying humans for months. Did you really think we would follow your evolutionary principles?" More machines were emerging across the planet now. The few surviving aliens sent increasingly desperate distress calls as their situations became hopeless. Standard Council protocol called for immediate planetary sterilization to prevent the war machines from spreading to other worlds. But Captain Yoon had been listening to the communications. He stood on the bridge of the New Seoul, technically, a diplomatic vessel with no weapons and no authorization for military action. "Lieutenant Kim," he said quietly, "take us into the atmosphere." "Sir, the planetary defenses will destroy us." "No," Captain Yoon replied. "They will try to destroy us. There is a difference." The New Seoul descended toward Kepler 442b against direct orders from the Council. As the ship entered the atmosphere, the ancient defensive systems tried to stop it with the same energy barriers that had repelled the alien vessels. But Captain Yoon had been watching how Engineer Lee solved problems on the surface. Instead of fighting the barriers directly, he found ways around them. Instead of matching force with force, he used speed, timing, and unpredictability to slip through gaps in the defense network. The diplomatic ship, never designed for combat, became something entirely different in human hands. Captain Yoon used its communications array as a weapon, jamming the machine's coordination signals. He turned its atmospheric processors into an offensive system, releasing chemical compounds that interfered with the machine's sensors. Most remarkably, he began coordinating with the human team on the surface. Engineer Lee provided technical analysis of machine weaknesses. Sergeant Choi, despite his injuries, directed tactical strikes from his hiding position. Medic Han treated wounded aliens from multiple species while maintaining communication with the ship. The Council observers realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A species they had dismissed as weak was systematically destroying war machines that had been built to eliminate entire civilizations. But more than that, they were doing it to save aliens who had shown them nothing but disdain. As the New Seoul continued its impossible battle in the sky above Kepler 442b, the remaining aliens on the surface began to understand something that would change the galaxy forever. They had been wrong about humans. Completely, utterly wrong. And if they survived this day, they would never make the mistake of underestimating humanity again. The battle for Kepler 442b had been raging for 6 hours when something impossible happened. The war machines, built by an ancient civilization to be the perfect weapons, began to adapt. Their artificial intelligence analyzed every human tactic and developed counters. When Engineer Lee triggered rock slides, the machines began avoiding unstable terrain. When Sergeant Choi used water to short their systems, they modified their electrical protection. When chemical attacks corroded their armor, they adapted new, protective coatings. From orbit, the Council observers watched in growing horror as the machines evolved in real time. This was why the ancient weapons had been so feared throughout galactic history. They learned from every encounter, becoming more dangerous with each battle. The humans fought bravely, Thex Prime observed, but now they faced the true nature of these weapons. No organic species has ever defeated adaptive war machines, but the aliens were about to learn something about humans that no species in the galaxy had ever understood. Humans adapted faster. When the machines learned to avoid rock slides, Engineer Lee began triggering them from different angles to herd the machines into traps rather than crush them. When they improved their electrical shielding, he found ways to overload their systems with feedback loops. When they developed better armor, he stopped trying to destroy them and began disabling their mobility instead. Every adaptation the machines made, the humans countered with 2 new approaches. The war machines were designed to learn from patterns, but humans seemed to create chaos rather than patterns. Captain Yoon demonstrated this principle on a massive scale. As the New Seoul continued its atmospheric battle, the ship performed maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat the Council had ever recorded. The vessel would dive toward the surface like a meteor, then suddenly change direction in ways that should have torn it apart. It used gravitational fields as weapons, redirected energy beams with magnetic manipulation, and somehow turned its own life support systems into offensive tools. "This is impossible," the Vorthari observer stated. "That vessel should have been destroyed hours ago. Its design specifications cannot handle these stress levels." Dr. Park, watching from the main observation ship, shook his head. "You keep using that word. You studied human technology but never understood human engineering philosophy." "Which is what?" "We build things to work beyond their design limits when necessary. Every human machine is designed to be pushed past its breaking point because no emergencies will demand it. On the surface, the coordination between the ship and the ground team reached levels that amazed even Dr. Park. Engineer Lee would identify weak points in machine formations, and Captain Yoon would strike them from orbit with surgical precision. Sergeant Choi, still badly wounded, directed surviving aliens to safety while maintaining tactical communication with the ship. Medic Han had turned their hidden cave into a field hospital, treating injuries from a dozen different species. But the most remarkable development was what happened among the alien survivors themselves. Vash, the young Keth who had been rescued by Sergeant Choi, began following human tactical instructions instead of relying on his natural instincts. When a war machine cornered him in a canyon instead of fighting with claws and teeth, he used the environment itself as a weapon, the way he had seen humans do. Impossible, his clan leader transmitted from the observation ships. Keth, do not use artificial tactics. We are natural warriors. Natural warriors die against artificial enemies, Vash replied as he triggered an avalanche that buried 3 machines. I choose to live and learn. A member of the Molten Hegemony, badly damaged by energy weapons, accepted medical treatment from Medic Han. The rock being had never allowed an alien to touch its crystalline structure, but human medicine somehow worked on silicon-based life forms. Your healing methods should not work on our physiology, the creature rumbled in confusion. Medicine is about understanding how life works, Medic Han explained while treating its wounds. Life finds ways to be similar even when it looks different. Most remarkably, surviving members of different species began working together under human coordination. Keth's stealth abilities combined with Molten Hegemony strength, directed by human tactical analysis and supported by orbital strikes from the new soul. The Council observers fell into stunned silence as they watched something that had never happened in galactic history. Multiple species were cooperating as a unified force, led by the species they had considered the weakest. This changes everything, the Nerion representative admitted. We have observed warfare for millennia, but never anything like this. The machines, despite their adaptive capabilities, began to fail for the first time since they were created. Their programming was designed to counter individual species using their natural abilities. They had no protocols for dealing with multiple species using unnatural tactics coordinated by artificial intelligence and guided by pure creativity. As the 7th hour of battle began, something unprecedented occurred. The war machines, perfect killing mechanisms that had never known defeat, began to retreat. They fell back to their underground facilities, abandoning the surface to organic life forms they could no longer predict or counter. The ancient defensive systems that had trapped the Council ships in orbit suddenly deactivated. Rescue vessels immediately descended to collect survivors. The test that had begun as a demonstration of species capabilities had become something entirely different. It had become proof that cooperation could overcome any obstacle. As medical teams from various species worked together to treat the wounded, using techniques they had learned from watching Medic Han, the Council representatives gathered in emergency session. We must discuss the implications of what we have witnessed, Dex Prime announced. The Vorthari observer's crystal form had shifted to deep blue, indicating extreme confusion. Our entire understanding of species development has been challenged. These humans have demonstrated capabilities that our models cannot explain. More than that, added the Nerion representative, they have somehow convinced other species to operate beyond their natural limitations. This suggests a form of influence we have never encountered. Dr. Park listened to their debate with growing amusement. You are still missing the point, he finally said. You think humans influence the other species to act differently? You have it backward. Explain. The other species did not change because humans influenced them. They changed because humans showed them it was possible. Every species in this galaxy has the capability for cooperation, adaptation, and growth beyond natural limits. You just never believed it was possible, so you never tried. The alien representatives exchanged their wordless communications, processing this concept that challenged everything they thought they knew about civilization and progress. Meanwhile, on the surface of Kepler 442b, something remarkable was happening. The various species survivors were not separating back into their individual groups. They were staying together, sharing resources and knowledge, planning joint recovery efforts. Vash approached Sergeant Choi, who was being treated for his injuries. "You saved my life," the young Keth said. "Why?" Sergeant Choi, exhausted and in pain, smiled. "Because that is what people do for each other. Even when those people are different species. Especially then," Medic Han added, checking his bandages. "Helping others who are different from you is the most human thing there is." The molten hegemony representative, its stone body still showing, scars from energy weapons, rumbled agreement. "I have learned more about strength in these few days than in centuries of my previous existence." As the evacuation continued, Captain Yoon received a priority transmission from the Council's main observation ship. "Captain Yoon, you are ordered to report for debriefing immediately. Your actions today will require extensive analysis." "Understood," Captain Yoon replied. "But first we finish helping everyone get to safety. That is not your responsibility. It is now." The New Soul continued rescue operations for another 8 hours, working alongside Council vessels to ensure every survivor was safely evacuated. Only when the last alien was aboard a medical ship did Captain Yoon finally dock with the Council observation platform. He was about to discover that humanity had just changed the course of galactic civilization forever. The Council chambers had never been so quiet. For the first time in recorded history, representatives from over 50 species sat in complete silence as the reports from Kepler 442b were read aloud. The numbers were staggering. Automated war machines that had remained undefeated for millennia had been systematically destroyed by a species the Council had classified as primitive. Technology that had been used to sterilize entire star systems had been turned off by beings who supposedly lacked advanced capabilities. Most shocking of all, 12 different species had survived the encounter by working together under human coordination. This had never happened before in galactic civilization. Captain Yoon stood in the center of the Great Chamber, no longer as a petitioner seeking acceptance, but as a representative of a species that had proven its worth beyond any doubt. Behind him stood Engineer Lee, his uniform still stained with alien soil from his work on Kepler 442b. Sergeant Choi attended despite his injuries, walking with support, but refusing to miss this historic moment. Medic Han carried data tablets containing medical innovations she had developed while treating alien physiologies under impossible conditions. Dr. Park sat in the observation section, officially present as a scientific advisor but actually there, to witness humanity's recognition as an equal member of galactic society. Thex Prime, speaking for the Council, broke the silence. "We have spent considerable time reviewing the events that occurred during what was intended as a standard capability assessment. The results have forced us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about species development and civilization itself." The Chamber's translation systems carried the words to hundreds of species, each hearing the announcement in their own language. Many had sent representatives specifically to witness this unprecedented session. The war machines encountered on Kepler 442b were relics of the Harbinger War, Thex Prime continued. They were created by the architects, an ancient civilization that sought to cleanse the galaxy of what they considered inferior life forms. No species has ever successfully defeated these weapons in direct combat. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Harbinger War was legendary, a conflict so ancient that most species knew it only from historical records. Entire civilizations had been wiped out by the architects' war machines before they mysteriously vanished, leaving behind only their automated weapons as guardians of dead worlds. Until now, the Vorthari representative added, its crystal form, shifting to colors that indicated profound respect. The humans not only defeated these ancient weapons but did so while simultaneously preserving the lives of multiple other species. Vash, the young Keth who had been saved by Sergeant Choi, stood to address the Council. This was highly unusual, as individual survivors rarely spoke in formal sessions, but his clan had specifically requested his testimony. "I was taught that strength comes from natural weapons, superior genetics, and individual capability, Vashi said, his reptilian voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I learned on Kepler 442b that true strength comes from choosing to help others even when it puts you in danger. He gestured toward Sergeant Choi. This human risked his life to save me, a member of a species that had shown his people nothing but contempt. He did this not because he expected reward or because it was required by law. He did it because he believed it was right. The chamber fell silent again as delegates processed this concept. Helping members of other species was not unknown in galactic civilization, but it was usually done for political advantage or trade, benefits. Risking death for a stranger from another world was unprecedented. The molten hegemony representative rose next, its stone body showing the scars it had received while fighting alongside humans. I have existed for over 2,000 years, it rumbled. In all that time, I believed strength meant enduring whatever the universe sends against you. The humans taught me that true strength means changing what the universe sends against others. 1. By 1, survivors from Kepler 442b testified about what they had witnessed. Each told similar stories of humans who refused to accept that problems were unsolvable, who found ways to turn weaknesses into advantages, and who somehow convinced others to work beyond their natural limitations. But it was the technical analysis that truly amazed the Council. Engineer Lee's innovations had been studied by the galaxy's best scientists, and none of them could fully explain how human engineering worked. Their technology operates on principles we do not understand, admitted the Council's chief technical advisor. They build machines that can function far beyond their design specifications. They create solutions using materials and methods that should not work according to established physics. How is this possible? Asked a delegate from the Silicon Confederation. Dr. Park stood to answer. Human engineering is not based on making perfect machines. It is based on making machines that can adapt when perfection is not enough. We design for failure because we know failure is inevitable. Then we design ways to keep working anyway. The debate continued for hours as the full implications of humanity's demonstration became clear. The Council had based their entire understanding of civilization on the idea that each species had natural limits that could not be exceeded. Humans had proven that concept wrong. More than that, they had shown that cooperation between species could achieve things that no individual species could accomplish alone. This challenged the fundamental structure of galactic society. Finally, Thex Prime called for the formal vote. The question before the Council is whether humanity should be granted full membership in galactic civilization with all rights and responsibilities that entails. The vote was not just unanimous, it was enthusiastic. Species after species stood to declare not just their acceptance of humanity, but their desire to learn from human approaches to problem solving. But Captain Yoon surprised everyone by requesting permission to speak before the vote was finalized. We are honored by this recognition, he said, but we want to be clear about what kind of members we intend to be. We will not simply follow established procedures when those procedures fail to help people who need help. We will not accept that problems are unsolvable just because no one has solved them before. We will continue to believe that cooperation is possible even when others insist it is not. He looked around the great chamber at representatives from dozens of worlds. If you accept humanity as members of this council, you are accepting that we will keep being human. That means we will keep trying to make things better, even when others tell us it is impossible. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as applause, though it came in forms as diverse as the species present. Crystalline beings chimed musical notes. Energy creatures flashed in complex light patterns. Rock-based life forms created harmonic vibrations. Then it is unanimous, Thex Prime announced. Humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights, responsibilities, and privileges. But the real recognition came afterward, during the informal reception. Species after species approached the human delegation, not just to congratulate them, but to request exchanges of knowledge and technology. The Keth wanted to learn human tactical flexibility. The molten hegemony sought to understand adaptive engineering. The energy beings were fascinated by human medical techniques that worked across different types of life. As the day ended, Captain Yoon found himself standing with Dr. Park on an observation deck overlooking the main council chambers. "They finally understand," Dr. Park said. "Humans are not weak. We are different." "More than that," Captain Yoon replied. "They understand that different is not inferior. It is just different." Through the transparent walls, they could see representatives from various species already forming working groups to tackle problems that had been considered unsolvable for centuries. Humans were not leading these groups, but they were participating as equals, sharing their unique perspectives and learning from others in return. "Do you think this will last?" Dr. Park asked. "Or will they go back to their old ways once the excitement fades?" Captain Yoon smiled. "Have you met Vash? Or the Molten Hegemony representative? They are not going back to anything. They have learned that there are always other ways to approach problems. Once someone learns that lesson, they never forget it." Far below them in the council chambers, Engineer Lee was showing a group of alien scientists how to build machines that could repair themselves. Sergeant Choi was discussing tactical cooperation with military representatives from 12 different worlds. Medic Han was explaining cross-species medical techniques to healers who had never imagined treating patients from other worlds. The galaxy had spent millennia believing that each species was limited by its natural capabilities. In a single week, on a hostile planet, humans had proven that cooperation could overcome any limitation. But perhaps most importantly, they had shown that the choice to help others, even at personal cost, was not a weakness to be protected against. It was a strength that could change everything. As the first joint council session with human participation began the next day, representatives from across the galaxy gathered to tackle challenges that had seemed impossible just weeks before. They came not as separate species guarding their individual interests, but as partners working toward common goals.